Get started. So welcome to Thrive, Lead, Succeed. I'm your host, Sandi Hokansson, Executive Coach and CEO of Soundleadership. And for those of you that are new to Soundleadership, it's a leadership coaching, training, and consulting company that I run. So today we're going to be discussing leading digital transformation with our special guest and expert, Marcus Sawyer, who's the founder and CEO of the EQ community. And I'll be introducing Marcus in just a minute. So for those of you that are new to the circle, who are joining for the first time, I created the circle about 3 years ago. And it's a way to provide ongoing leadership support to my clients and their leaders, and also to support fellow leaders in my community and my network. So it's a forum for leaders to share their expertise with each other and share what we're going through and help and support each other continue on our leadership journey. You can find previous circle sessions on my website or my YouTube channel. Last session's link is up and available. We had a very fascinating and interesting discussion with Lauren Levicki-Corville, who's the president of Dress for Success Houston. So we explored the not-for-profit sector, particularly around leading social responsibility. And if you haven't had a chance to check in with that, please do so. It was a really great conversation. So now I'm very pleased to introduce you to my special guest, Marcus Sawyer. And we're going to open it up now and stop the slide sharing for a minute. And so you can see Marcus and I. You can choose to see the spotlight of Marcus and I, or you can see the link of everyone there on your gallery view. So I had the pleasure of working with Marcus for several years. And one of the really cool things about him that you'll see today is that he can take seemingly very complex issues, and sometimes for those non-IT people, myself among them, sometimes IT terminology seems a little more complex to me, and definitely I relied a lot on my IT leaders when I was leading this subsidiary in Canada. But what Marcus has been able to do and is able to do is take complex issues and make them much more digestible for us and for leaders to embrace digital transformation. Marcus spent the last 15 years working his way up from kind of an entry level, beginning job up to an executive level and CEO of a division within a Fortune 500 organization. And the company, again, this is where we work together. His role was focused on online recruitment and digital transformation. As I mentioned, he's currently founder of his own organization. He'll be talking a little bit about that in a few minutes. Marcus is ranked in the top 100 most influential people in the staffing industry by the Staffing Industry Analyst. He served on the Microsoft Services Executive Board for 3 years, and he's an investor in HR tech. So we're thrilled to have him, and welcome to the circle, Marcus.
Thanks for having me, Sandi. Really appreciate it.
Really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me too.
Good. So let's dig in. Why don't you first start by telling all of us a little bit about your expertise and what gets you excited about digital?
Well, a lot of the, I suppose, transformations that have taken place within the world of work have seemingly been digital. So I was fortunate enough to start in an industry, within the staff and recruiting industry, where the big thing that we were all disrupting at the time was newspapers. Because many of you may recall that a lot of the great adverts and the great job ads were in newspapers. But the big problem is you had no idea whether anybody read your ad or not unless you picked up a phone call. Or you received a phone call from that. So a lot of my time has been spent on kind of figuring out what's next. And one big part of that was, how do you leverage information and data at scale, but also empower customers to have just a more user-friendly and a better experience. So my expertise kind of started on that journey, and moving from sales more into product. Done some AI work with some organizations that we integrate in, a company called Career Builder, and then went to the Adecco group, where I think I was actually, and there's some familiar faces on here, and one that actually welcomed me on my first day in particular. I'm going to shout out Daniel Masata. When I remember my first day when I started at Adecco, and yeah, I think Daniel and I remember it very, very clearly. We were walking into the office in Switzerland, and we were having a conversation just about where things are going. And he was leading the IT sector at the time, and we talked about digital transformation and how that will really change our industry. So I started on that journey of looking at organizations that could disrupt us, partnering with organizations, investing in organizations, and building organizations across the Adecco group to really help us stay relevant in the staff and recruiting industry.
Good. Great. So tell us a little bit about, let's start with the definition, okay? And there's lots of definitions of digital transformation, but what's your working definition?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think that there can be many answers depending on the type of business that you're in and what you're trying to achieve. But I think in the end, it boils down to, which is going to be an unsexy word and term, but it's going to be around leverage productivity. So with people, so you hire more people to solve that business problem or to grow your business or scale it. And then now it's been, can you automate that problem? So it's leveraging, for me, it's really leveraging technology as a way to increase productivity for your organization, which could mean increasing revenue or becoming more efficient to lower costs.
Okay, so leveraging technology to increase efficiencies and lower costs. Sounds like something we all want to do, and we're all encouraged to do all the time. So why do you believe it's important? And maybe I'll just share first, you know, when I was, as I referred to a little earlier, when I was in a leadership position over a large organization, I had a really fantastic VP of IT, and anything that kind of came in that was in that area, I mean, she ran with, she led it, and she loved it. And I just kind of knew that she was going to look after it. I didn't really do a lot myself except support her. But that's changed a lot over the last several years, and certainly through the pandemic. And now, you know, you can't really delegate that to someone else anymore. You really have to lead from the top down. So why do you believe it's important for executives to embrace and lead themselves digital transformation?
Well, I think that if you look at a lot of the businesses that have thrived in the pandemic, for instance, because there have been many, and there have been many that have gone out of business. We always see this in a downturn. The ones that have thrived have had some element of digital to them. So whether that is, let's take the restaurant industry for stars. I've got a friend of mine who's empowering restaurants to digitalize their menus. So he's digitalizing the world's menus. But then what came out of that is, hey, not only do we need to digitalize the menus, but we need to be able to change our model to deliver food. So those companies that have started to go along that particular journey were really embracing the way their delivery and operating model works. And I don't think that's a frontline decision only. That's an executive level decision. So that's one part of it. I think the other part is that you just learn a ton. So what I like to say is we've got to go through the pain first. And if you go into a mindset of doing things that you don't really want to do, but you know are right for the customer, and then you can figure out, okay, well, in the end, is there a way for us to maybe automate this process? Is this something we need to be doing internally, or do we outsource it? I think that helps you deeply understand your business. And again, I think that's an executive level thing, because you're going to know the ins and outs and the underworking worlds of your business. So, and then the other big part of it, which I don't think we talk about so much, but it's super important, is the incentive structures. So one of the big challenges for digital transformation is that the incentive structures are misaligned. You're asking people to automate their roles or automate their jobs that they're working on day to day. And you have to figure out, how do you bring everybody along the journey? So not only can you digitalize the processes to serve your customer better, but your people internally who are working with you, you can create a future for them that's going to be really something that they're going to want to be part of for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's about embedding. It's really about knowing your business, right? And it's embedded right into your business, right? When you're changing any process. So that's important. But also this last piece you mentioned, which is more about messaging and the communication, right? And even getting engagement, increasing engagement in this and adoption. That is an executive and senior leader message. And that is really what the turning point will be for success or not success is how many of those people are singing the same tune. So I think that's really, really key. So what do you suggest non-IT leaders can get? How can they get more comfortable with leading this and embracing this?
Well, I don't actually think about digital as being an IT thing per se. I see it as more of a business operations and process thing. So I think if you really enjoy that part of the business, because I think a lot of people who run business do actually like to be more efficient, more effective. Then it's about, well, how do you solve the problems? So one of the things I always try and look at is what is the problem we're trying to solve generally before even the opportunity, and then work back from that. And then you can figure out, is that solved by technology or is that solved by a person? So the actual execution and delivery, you might need somebody who has technical expertise and the skills and subject matter expert. But the strategy proponent is something that you can really lead yourself as an executive. But the other thing I would say is, you think about everything that we do in our daily lives. Everybody on here, no doubt, has got a mobile phone, a cell phone with apps that they use every single day, and they've been doing for a long period of time. If we think about some of the leading companies today that we may consider tech companies, let's take Amazon for instance. I think it was 68% of the North Americans use Amazon. Is it really a tech company? Or is it a retailer that's tech enabled, or is it a logistics business? And I think trying to figure out what are the examples in your day-to-day life of things that you use, that you like, and how you delight customers, and think how are you really doing that in your business is really important. Because if you're not doing it, somebody else will be trying to figure out a way in order to do that and delight your customers. So I think that there's a big opportunity there just to really do an internal audit of what you use in your personal life, and then bring that back through into your business and see if that will start to help to enhance how you operate.
Yeah, wow, powerful. And I really like how you gave me a little nudge there on the fact that, even just our paradigm around, what's IT, what's not, and that the fact that this is business, this is process, this is operations, and just breaking those paradigms of perhaps how we used to kind of think who belongs in what. This is really, as I mentioned earlier, embedded right now, just how we work these days. So thank you for that. Even just kind of some of the languaging around that is really helpful. And I love just the concept of your internal audit of how we, just do work in our everyday life, how we procure our own goods and services, right? And what do you think with that lens, what would really excite our clients?
Yeah.
So, fantastic insights there. Okay, so you started a little bit about, you named a couple of those key steps. So if you were thinking about it from a step point of view, what are some of the key steps when you're facing when you're starting out and thinking about leading a digital transformation? So you've got a problem, you want to solve it with technology. So what are some steps there to take?
Yeah, so I also think that the words and the terminology around digital transformation just sounds really big and grandiose and hard. And how do you, again, work back to some of the issues that you have in your business and then figure out what are the solutions that you can align to that? So I'm sure today there are problems that everybody's trying to solve within their business. And our usual go-to is maybe let's hire somebody. Or maybe you get a consultant in to help you dissect the problem. So it's then not your problem, it's somebody else's problem. And I think that if we can start to dissect really what are the characteristics of the problem, so going really, really deep into that, and then figuring out, is there a technology that exists in this space? And that's a really simple Google search. You could look at, I'll give you a prime example. This is something that I use in our business today. So I had the luxury of, when being at Adecco, that I had an assistant, and I always had and to help me. And it wasn't because I needed an assistant because I was at a certain level. I just needed to like help to book stuff, travel, schedules, because I couldn't deal with that. Now, going into your own startup, you don't have some of those luxuries. You got to make some trade-offs and some tough choices. So assistant wasn't the first on my list in order to build. It was like, but I still need to book these meetings, I still need to be effective. So one of the first thing I looked at was, are there any virtual assistants? And you can find virtual assistants today, which you can use remote. And then I thought, well, are there any digital assistants? I found this company, Amy.ai, which is kind of like Calendly. And I think, Sandi, we've kind of gone back and forth, and people think it's a real human. But it's just saved me a lot of time for booking meetings. And it also gives me kind of the stock of, well, how many meetings have I had? Who am I spending my time with? How productive is that? And then I get that audit. So it wasn't like a big digital transformation, but it probably saved us hiring a person for a role that was non-core to the business. So, and one of the things I saw IBM do a while back, and again, some folks on the call may know this, is that they really started to look at what was core to their business, what was non-core to their business, and then based on those two areas, what do you outsource and then what do you automate? So I think instead of taking this big digital transformation, make a list of your top 5 problems, figure out, can they be solved by people or automation, or is there somebody doing something like that in that particular space? And really start exploring and contacting them and reach out for demos, because they're all going to try and sell you something anyway. So they'll be happy to do a demo, and you'll probably learn something, and then you'll figure out. And then the next question is always, do you build, do you buy, or do you partner? So those are the ways that I really think about starting the digital transformation, at least if you haven't started yet.
Good. That's very helpful. You see, you just did what I said you do, was take complex things or seemingly complex, and reduce them down so we could better understand them, and how we can use them and how we can talk about them. So that was very, very helpful. So can you share an example of a digital transformation project that you led?
Yeah, so there were a few examples within the group. So and I say within Adecco in particular, that we were buying and building companies that were focused on making us more effective as a way that we delivered staffing and recruiting. So some of them I led from a high level, but there were always leaders in those businesses who would have to think about it every single day. So one, we were automating more of our high frequency, high volume, temporary things in that area. Firstly, there was a misconception, and I'll tell 2 stories in a second, just around those outside of leading the transformation, which hopefully will simplify it. But what we found, the end was, clients didn't want another portal to log into. So I think the misconception of digital is that you just need an app. So let's just create an app, and that will solve all the problems. But clients don't actually want another app. What they actually want is their problem solved quicker. The other thing I realized, they don't care about your app. So no one cares about your new website. No one cares about your new app. No one cares about EQ Community. No one. What they care about is, are you going to help me deliver on that problem that I have more effectively? So it goes back to same business principles: better, faster, and less expensive. So what we found is that the real problem in this digital part of the digital transformation was the candidates. Candidates wanted to get access to opportunities as quick as frequently as possible and have the control to change their profiles instead of having to speak to a recruiter each time. So our stakeholder, if you like, wasn't necessarily the customer, because we'd still go and sell to them directly, but it was really automating the candidate workflow and the candidate process. Does that help? And maybe I'll go into more of a high class problem that I saw.
Sure, if you'd like, give another example, but that definitely helps, because some of them are simple that you're talking about, like your AI assistant, but some of them are quite complex, right? Because you're talking about an enterprise-wide change, right? And so when those things happen, there's a lot of steps involved in leading that, and a lot of the leaders, that I work with are dealing with these enterprise-wide transformation, and they involve digital, obviously, components to it.
So I think at the enterprise level, again, it's, and I keep talking about the problem, but it's figuring out where are the problems, but also the opportunities, and having a team or at least a person focused on that. And then once you have people focused on that, being able to bubble up those challenges. A lot of the digital transformations that I've seen, and we've seen in the pandemic more recently, some of them have been forced. So if I don't do this, I'm going to go out of business. Like, I'm going to die. The business is going to die. If we can't open up our restaurants because we can't have people in room dining, and we decide not to sell online, our restaurant's not going to exist. So what I think, painting some scenarios of what would happen if, in the worst case scenarios, one way that an enterprise can also start. I feel like a lot of enterprises, and maybe I've got this wrong, but a lot of them who are still doing business have started on some kind of journey, but maybe not accelerated it. And I think some of the reasons, and I'll go back, are down to the incentives. So having someone focused on it, and then having some people incentivized around the digital transformation to make sure that there's not misalignment, I think is a really, really key part of that, in order to get started. The other thing that you can do is you can just look around you. I'm sure in your industry, if you Google, you type in the digital versions of your industry, you'll find all these different startups that are popping up. And if you're a big enterprise, a lot of them will be open to speak to you for partnerships, investments, and so on. That was one of the other things that we started to do. We started to partner with companies that were in our space, and understand a little bit more about how they work. And then it's a buy, build, or continuous partner decision that you have to make. I think getting started with a team, incentivizing that team, and then partnering with some startups that are in your space is really a really good way to kickstart things.
Excellent. And partnering is really one of the ways that when you read about transformational leadership, that is one of the key competencies of a transformational leader, is someone that can build partnerships and allies, because we all can't do it ourselves, and the world is small these days, and we all need to work together. So finding those partnerships are really key. So what do you do when you face obstacles and barriers? Obviously, that's a big part of this too, and there's many different types of those. Can you share a little bit about that and what leaders can do to work around those things?
Yeah, again, so I think it's so nuanced. There's probably not going to be a one size that fits all, but I'd like to go back to that partnering piece, because I think that's really important. It's hard to partner on anything or with anyone unless you know what your North Star is as a business. So unless you know what you're dedicated and you're focused to, it's hard to partner, because you then feel like everybody else is competition. So I think one of the obstacles, again, and I kind of keep going back, you've got the top level executives want to do it, and we've all seen that executives give you 10 ideas and they tell people to go and execute on them, and everyone's like, every time they have a board meeting or a new meeting, they're like, you come out of this meeting, you have an ops review, and you've got these 10 things that you have to do as a team. And I think a lot of us have been there. And then at the front level, they'll execute. and they will, if the communication is clear, they will deliver on what you ask them to if you've got a good team. Where the bottlenecks are generally in the middle layer. And the reason being is they have access to the front level, they have access to the top layer, and I think that that's overlooked. So empowering that middle layer to get things done, I think is really, really important. And thinking through, what would it mean if we do automate these steps of this part of your job? Does that mean that that job no longer exists? How can we elevate you? How can we upskill you? How can we help you to be part of this digital transformation? And we've done a lot. And one of the things I think that I take for granted is we've done a lot of exploring and discovery at the start. And that was meeting with new companies, doing some design thinking processes, working with some of the biggest software companies and figuring out how they do lead digital transformation. So I think you do that exploring, but then it's pick a problem, one problem, may not have to be your biggest, try and solve that problem in a new way, and also give it to somebody and make them own it. So say, this is your problem now, and you're going to deliver it, and you've got 3-4 months to come back with an answer. Here's your budget. And then support them as they start to do that. So I think, yeah, really dissecting the problem. Again, I know I keep repeating myself, but I think that's important.
No, that's really, really powerful. And sometimes we want to change for change's sake, and we really have to focus the change solution around what the problems are, right? And we all have those. Or how to engage clients better, what the client feedback is telling us, what our internal stakeholders are telling us. So that's great. Now, we've talked about the large, we kind of gravitated to the large enterprise now, but I know that one of my clients had sent in a question in advance of our chat today, and his question was centered around the smaller organization, leading a smaller organization. So one without a lot of extra staff or a lot of resources. So what approach is it the same kind of approach that you're talking about, or does it vary if there's less resources and perhaps there aren't experts? What do you suggest then?
Yeah, so I think it actually becomes more critical for the leadership to be involved when the business is smaller, because you have a disproportionate impact on the next steps of that. And in some senses, it's easier to change processes because there's less complexity. So I'll give an example. So my uncle, he's in his 60s. He used to be a retailer at one of the large retail firms. He actually invented the first machine washable suit. So he was in the retail business, deep in the retail business for some time. And he decided that he was going to go and as he started to wind down, he was going to build a business selling vintage pens from the 1900s. So he sells vintage pens from the 1900s, and those pens range anywhere from $1,000 to $8,000-$9,000 a pen. Right. I've actually, I don't know if you can see it, you can't see it, but this is one of the pens he gave me. This is not a $1,000 pen, right? I think I got a $200 one from him. But so he was in this really old school business. Everybody in his world, they go to physical events. So they meet up, they go to conferences, they trade. They buy all these pens, and between them, they know everybody in that space. What he found was that he could be the most digital. He could be the digital leader of the pen space. And how he found this out was he started to sell his pens online. And if anybody told me that somebody's going to spend $5,000 on a pen without meeting anybody online, I would have thought he was crazy. So in order to develop that process, he really took some of the offline practices, building credibility, building a brand, making sure that all his products were labeled accordingly, making sure that he was deep and niche in a particular area and developing that online, and then building an online portal where people can go and purchase these antique pens. So I don't think it's just for big businesses. I think it's for small businesses as well, and also businesses that the ones that are not, I suppose, the ones that are not discovered, the most undiscovered businesses, the ones that you think you can't transform, are probably the ones where you can win and own that space, because that means that nobody's really thought through it and has tried to do it. The ones that are really sexy are probably already gone. So I think if your industry is in a very archaic manner, that is ripe for disruption, right for you to lead it and transform it as well. So I think small businesses can do that really well. More of a, and I'll just give one example, because I was thinking about it earlier. I had a chance to go to McLaren's Innovation Center, and what I noticed about McLaren, they had this really fantastic innovation center in the outskirts of London, where they were driving efficiency and process for their Formula One drivers. So they would have all of the technology that you could believe. So this tech was state of the art to help them get faster by the millisecond. We got a chance to change tires, do all that stuff, and they had super high tech, super high tech. So that was on one end of the business. And when you went into their manufacturing unit, and so we actually got to see the manufacturing unit of how they built the cars, they were all handmade. So there were individual people making these cars. There were no machineries. There was no machine. They were all handmade, and they were just on areas. So I think figuring out what is your core business. If you're a high-end business, there are parts that you may not want to automate. To be competitive, if you need to measure, if it's data, and so those are the areas that you need to automate. Because I can tell you, if you go into Ford's manufacturing plant, it's going to be all it's going to be all machinery, all industrial, but the level of the quality is different. So, and the reason I say all of this is understanding your business and being true to yourself will tell you where you need to automate and where you can continue to deliver a high touch service.
The car lovers love that story. To think there's still cars being made handcrafted. That's pretty cool. Great. So what I'd like to do is open it up for a couple questions. I know that a couple questions have come in as well. And so let me just see here. I think Jackie had a question. Jackie? Can you unmute yourself there and ask a question for Marcus?
Yes. Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Hi, Sandi. Hi, Marcus.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Your explanation, your description has really made it much less daunting for us non-IT folks. So thank you. I'm feeling a lot better about the entire topic. So on that note, what can you tell us leaders? How can we be better prepared for more change ahead? Is there anything you can share on that?
Well, and I paused because I'm thinking about, I was going to say something, and then I thought about the pandemic, and I was like, well, how do you prepare for that? No one knew that was going to happen. Generally speaking, I think what I've done in some of the organizations that were driving transformation is they had people that weren't only looking inward, but were looking outward. So a lot of, and you've probably heard the famous quote, is the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So if you want to find the future, you can find that in a market which has constraints. And a lot of the emerging markets have significant constraints. And you probably hear about Africa leapfrogging areas around their infrastructure for their, basically for their internet and bandwidth capability. And it's because they have constraints, because they didn't have what we had before in certain markets. So I think looking outward and having somebody focus, if it's not yourself, really starting to scan the market. And we kind of had a market radar. And there are companies that, and that gives you a sense of what's going on. I always kind of do this, I have to pull myself back in terms of researching, but there's a company called SimilarWeb, which basically just tells you the traffic for all your competitors. Once you look at what SimilarWeb are doing, and then you can look at the digital ones and see, well, where are you getting the traffic from? Where are the buyers coming from? Where are the sellers coming from? So I think having one eye looking outward and then bringing that in and having somebody's job focused on that, I think really helps to prepare for the future, because it's here, it's just not here.
That's great. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Jackie. I love that example of the leapfrogging. That is really true, right? When there's constraints. I mean, if you even think about, Germany's, innovation and, their leadership around the world, and, they have unique challenges there with less resources than other countries in some ways. So they've innovated their way to a leadership giant, right? And so there's lots of examples of that worldwide, and it's great to see some more in Africa, as you mentioned, in other areas. Okay, great. Does anyone else have a question? I have another one that's come in. Just let me see through chat here. I have one that's come in through chat that I'll share with you, Marcus. So the question is, any recommendations for helping staff who are new to digital technologies or aren't even comfortable? We're a little more old school, not even perhaps comfortable with the iPhone. We definitely, in a lot of organizations still have a lot of those old school people. So
Yeah.
What are some suggestions for those people that could be the resistors?
Yeah, it's I think it depends on just to be really critical. It depends on if you want to keep them. If you want them to be part of that journey and you want to keep them, then you have to invest in upskilling them. We bought a company at Deco before, General Assembly, that focuses on just doing that. So I think investing in that upskilling, also exploring as well, and making it part of your operating model. So it's hard to deliver on projects if you don't commit time to it. So is it on your calendar once a month, once every 2 weeks to discuss digital and then come up with solutions, and are you giving them projects and tasks to deliver on? And if not, then they're not just going to come up with it because they are, as you said, they're not necessarily going to be curious. And I've found, what I found really interesting is that there are people who are not quote unquote digital, not IT, but are so curious that they're the ones that drive that digital transformation because of their curiosity, because they're so hungry for understanding how things work and the mechanics. So I think, again, trying to take out the word digital and take out IT, but going back to business processes and helping people understand and see how they can automate things and opening their eyes, I think is absolutely key. So upskilling and putting time on the calendar, good old business processes, nothing too fancy. Good,
excellent. Great. So why don't you take a minute or so and tell us about your new venture, just to let us know a little bit about what your new world looks like.
Yeah, well, I thought that after spending a long period of time in the staff and recruiting industry, and we're both with online job boards, to traditional recruiting, to HR tech, there was really a need to create more of a community feel, and focused in on the element of diversity and inclusion. So I wanted to build a space which would empower people to get information and support that they need to help them progress along their career as an individual standpoint. And then the problem that I really saw with companies, after spending some time in the VC space and connecting with those, is these companies grow really, really fast. It's obviously hard to get access to talent, but at the same token, some of them are very purpose driven and they want to make sure that they get access to diverse talent. So they've made these diversity pledges. They said, this is what I want to do around changing the way that the landscape looks, whether that's balancing agenda or whether that's getting more people of color into organizations, but they didn't know how. So we created an environment that allows members to be part of a community upskill. So you may not necessarily even be looking for a job. You might just be interested in learning more. And then for companies to get access to high quality talent that is really from a diverse background. So yeah, that's EQ, and yeah, just a little bit about what we do.
Very cool. And for everyone here, I've checked it out a little bit myself. So please go and have a look at what Marcus is doing. It's very cool and very timely for today's world as well. So final thoughts, Marcus, as we wrap up today. It's just been such a pleasure having you on the circle. I think we've all got some really good nuggets out of this today and takeaways. And what would you like to leave the leadership community with today?
Well, I think that digital transformation doesn't have to be scary. Somebody told me once, it's if you want to solve a big problem, you have to break it down into small pieces. So figure out what are those areas that are critical and prioritize, and you'll be just fine. There are plenty of people, companies, and organizations that want to support that transformation and change. So seek that help, but it doesn't have to be scary. It's something that I think is absolutely required in order for you to grow. And I just want to say thanks for people listening and spending the time, and thank you, Sandi, for having me today. I really appreciate it, and hope there was some useful parts of the conversation. And if you want to ever connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn or at eq.community, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Marcus, and thank you for your time and your wisdom and making us less fearful and all ready to go here. So it's a pleasure, as always, speaking to you. Thank you, everyone, for joining the circle today. As some of you may know, we take the summer off, so we'll meet up again in the fall, and I'll be sending out some dates and some speakers. If you'd like to be a speaker on the circle, I'm definitely interested in speaking to you, so please reach out to me and let me know. And enjoy the summer. Some of the pandemic is loosening a little bit some of the restrictions, and so hopefully we can all get a little bit back to normal this summer and enjoy ourselves a little bit. So take care, lead well, and reach out to me if you need me. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Great to see you all. Bye-bye.